Over Fear. I'm your host, Chad Jenkins. Hey, I just want to take this time for a couple of friendly reminders. One, the biggest thing about this podcast, as everybody's calling it a podcast, but about this YouTube show, is if you can help me out and share it with folks out there that you know that it might resonate with, and share it with those who maybe are on the fence about Christ, on the fence in their journey in faith. But maybe it would strike a nerve with them and light a fire underneath them to hear a message that might resonate with them. So I'm asking you guys to continue sharing it with your audiences and with those in the combat veteran community. Hey, if you can copy and paste that YouTube channel link and send it to a buddy or two who's out there, and one man's trash is another man's treasure. So I'd want to continue sharing this because I think there's power to be gained in hearing the stories of fellow warriors, fellow veterans out there and their walk with Christ. Sometimes that testimony of what he has done in our lives speak volumes to other individuals, and they're able to gain a clarity, and they're also able to gain a recognition that they're not alone in whatever they are in their journey, wherever they are in their journey. So I'd ask for that. Another thing, don't really know. I haven't really opened a segment like this, but I do want to say in my quiet time this morning, I was in First Peter and just ended up reading the entire book of First Peter. And a common theme that continued to be reinforced throughout First Peter was just be alert and be of sober mind. I think it was at least 3 references, if not 4 references, and it's a short book. I think it's only 5 chapters, but be alert and be of sober mind. And when I say of sober mind, yes, I will declare I do not drink alcohol. I've stopped drinking 5 years ago now. And I'm not even talking about that, although I think it's a discussion to be had in the combat veteran community about alcohol and maybe the uses that we need to look at and do the hard retrospective looks at our use with alcohol. But when I think about sober mind, I'm thinking about being fully clear in our conscious of what we're putting in our heart, what we're putting in our mind, and where we're putting our time and effort and treasure in, of being sober, of sober mind in Christ. And then as well as being alert of the times in which we live and the times in which the Lord has had us in right here and right now. So just food for thought. If you want to give your feedback, I'm always open to it. So please leave a comment, post your comments on what the Lord is doing in your life and what you think about being sober and being alert in 2022. So with that, I want to introduce our next guest here on Christ Over Fear, Derek Hanel, and I can't wait to have him on. He's a former Navy SEAL, former police officer with Norfolk Police Department after he left the SEALs, and then he went on and actually was a instructor at the Naval Special Warfare Preparatory School up in Illinois. And he's out of all of that now. He's in the private sector, but I want to hear his journey, hear his story. So we're excited to have Derek on. So let me bring him on. Derek, good morning. How you doing, buddy?
Good morning. Good morning. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you too. So one, thanks for joining me. It's always special when I get to have a Navy SEAL on board, because, me being a former Ranger and all that stuff, I just, I respect what you all do. And I tell you a quick story. In November, I was out in San Diego, and we went on over to Coronado, and my wife and I visited that, what is it? Coronado del Rey, I believe, the hotel that's right up. What is it?
Hotel Del.
Hotel Del. Yes. And I put my feet in the water, and this is in November. And I mean, it about brought me to my knees. So I can't even imagine what you guys went through, what you endure in that front, but it's pretty impressive nonetheless.
Yeah. It's not warm water all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. No kidding.
It's warm. They just keep you in longer. So
yeah. Right. Well, hey, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, and you know what? I didn't do in the intro, and I wanted to. You are also a TEDx speaker, which I found last night and I thought was very cool, was awesome. So anybody who's listening, go ahead and, what is it? It's Cultivating the Mind, I believe is the title of that TEDx speech. So I thought that was pretty cool. And let's start there. We'll go in reverse order. How'd you become a TEDx speaker?
This kind of happened randomly. So I was working with a buddy of mine who were doing team building camps for football teams and local teams. And I was just giving a talk to the team, and someone I guess he was a mental toughness coach for the school or had something involved with that. So after I finished speaking with the team, he approached me and said, "Hey, we do a TEDx in the area, and then down south in Illinois, and would you be willing to come on and give us a talk?" Absolutely. So that whole process was interesting. I have a 90-minute class I would teach to my students at the prep school, and I kind of whittled that down to like 15 minutes. And then I sent it in, and the text like, it's too long. It needs to be shorter. I was like, oh my gosh, there's only so much I can do, but it was good. It was a fun experience, a little nerve wracking. My wife came with me, and it was like talking to a dark wall, because I couldn't see anyone. I like to engage and see eyes and talk, but it was a good experience. It was fun.
Well, yeah, no, and I think that's really cool. I mean, and the amount of, or the limited amount of individuals that have, given a TEDx talk or TED talk, it's pretty cool. So to get your perspective on that. And then my question on that, did you memorize the whole thing pretty much, or did you have bullet points in your head, or did you go ahead and whittle it down? Because I think it ends up being about 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
And then did you say again?
It was in my head. I typed it out. I teach but the class is like a 90-minute class, and I teach it versus on a PowerPoint. But I wrote it, so I have it something going on, and they wanted me to give it beforehand, just to get all the nuts and bolts out of it. So I did it. It was good, and yeah, I did memorize it. Afterwards, I went back and watched it, and I was like, oh, I forgot something.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
At one point, So yeah.
No, that's really cool. I thought that was a unique way to be used, and I mean, just the amount of eyeballs that watch those and consume those. That's pretty incredible to have that impact. So I thought that was really neat. And then let's get into Derek. How did you what's your background as far as getting you to the Navy SEALs and going through BUDS and going through that route? What that looked like from a high school, college standpoint?
Yeah, so my dad, he was a big influence. He was Air Force PJ, and he was in Vietnam, and he didn't know about the SEALs, but he did cross paths with them over there. And he would just, when he had me, ever since I could remember, he always talked about the SEALs with me. Like, just, he idolized them, and it was a big thing for him. And that's what I just always wanted to do growing up, always. And that was just me. My dad has a picture of me when I was like 4 years old, and I'm about to jump off into the pool. And on the back of it, it says Future Frogman.
Wow.
Like
no kidding.
1984, it's like,
yeah.
But anyway, so it was a part of my life. And then going into high school, every book I read was a SEAL book. We didn't have the internet like that back then, and all I had was like the Orr Kellys and the old school Vietnam SEAL books. And it was just something I wanted to do. And what's interesting, I dropped all of it towards the end of high school. I was really involved in my church, and I was speaking and involved in my youth group. And I was like, I think people are like, listen, you like to learn the Bible. You love to talk. So, maybe you might want to go into ministry. I was like, I don't know. And then I spoke some more, and I love to learn. I love to read the Bible. And I dropped Navy altogether. Like, everyone was like, what? Then I went to Gardner-Webb. I was on a path to be a pastor there. And then 9/11 happened, which just changed everything. And then as soon as I graduated, it's a long story, but as soon as I graduated college, I went right into late entry program, and graduated BUDS like a year later.
Yeah. Now, where Gardner-Webb, where's that located?
Boiling Springs, North Carolina. It's like 45 minutes west of Charlotte.
Okay. And did you grow up in Charlotte or in North Carolina? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Virginia.
In Virginia.
Yeah. Central Virginia, Alta Vista, Virginia. It was very small. I moved around a lot. Lived in Virginia, moved down to Florida, lived in Tennessee.
Was this while your dad was he still a PJ at this time, or was this after he had gotten out?
This was after he got out.
Okay. All right.
He was pretty much done with the military. Once he got out, he was with the whole Vietnam situation. It was hard on him dealing with that.
Yeah, but it seems like he was there for you as a father,
Yeah.
and was able to come home and still be, be a solid man for you growing up and all of that, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, because I shouldn't say remarkable like it's an anomaly, but I mean it's just that's a difficult war to come home to and
Was.
reacclimate.
Yeah. He'd tell me stories, but coming home, and he went to University of Florida. He basically got in the military for the GI Bill, and he went to Florida, and he'd just tell me stories like people just did not like the military.
Yeah.
They did not like him, and he pretty much got rid of all of his military stuff. It's not that he didn't really get into his head much about it, but he was not fond of society's view of the military when he got out.
Well, and the thing about that too is, I've shared it multiple times, so it's a kind of a broken record, but it's part of the story of my healing combat trauma group that I did down in the VA in West Palm Beach. It was predominantly Vietnam veterans that were in that group. It was like 15 of us, 13 of the 15 were Vietnam guys. And I mean, to a man, that's exactly what they said was, I mean, it was just where they had to discard everything. And I mean, it was this like shameful societal, pointing of the finger at these guys who just all intentions of, doing the right thing while they were in. They did the right thing while they were over there. There was the war is hell, right?
Yeah.
But even 50 years later, 60 years later, I mean, still the effects of that and how deep of a wound that has for a lot of combat veterans from the Vietnam era. It's tremendous. That's why every time I see a guy who's wearing a Vietnam veteran hat, I go and thank him for paving the way for how our generation gets treated today, because they did not get that. They still are owed more of a thank you of gratitude, in my opinion. And, but at least now they can at least wear those hats and be out there and have the dignity and the respect that they deserve.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. It's like amazing to see how military is treated now as opposed to what it was and what happened over those 30, 40 years. It's remarkable. I appreciate their service for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's get back to you, Derek. You were raised somewhat in a Christian home. It seems like you were close to the Lord, at least in high school. And when you were deciding on what path you were going to take once you were in high school, what's that story? What's that journey? Kind of give us the nuts and bolts of that, if you will.
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home. I was forced to go to church, as a little kid. I didn't want to go, and everywhere I was Southern Baptist, right? So it's like super strict, dressed to the nines, hymnals,
Yeah,
it's like the Protestant Catholicism, right? So, but we always went to church. Where I was part of church. Every move we went. We'd always found a First Baptist church there, and it was just part of my life. And high school was really when I was saved in 1993 in September, and high school was a phenomenal experience for me because our youth group was so active. It was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Aiken, great friend of mine, was the youth or the Sunday school teacher, and all the Sunday school class was like packed of high schoolers and and they were all my friends from school. We all played sports together. We all went to church together. So I saw these people all the time. And then our youth pastor was super nice. He graduated from Liberty University, right there next to Alta Vista, and just a huge impact in my life. Huge impact. And it was just fun. It made being a Christian fun, and enjoying spending time with friends talking about weird stuff in the Bible. And it was just an awesome time for me. I loved high school.
Which is unbelievable. I feel like I do feel like that's an anomaly, really. And maybe I'm wrong, but it all, and I guess I shouldn't say anomaly, but because it's there. I mean, the youth group that my daughter is associated with, it's actually my wife's best friend. She's the one who runs it, and she has that dynamic
Yeah.
of having that tight knit and those kids that, and makes it fun, makes it engaging, makes it cool, if you will. But I would say it's probably not as large as I would, it sounds like for you it was a majority of the kids from your school were a part of that. I think here it's a little bit, it's not the majority, it's probably the minority of individuals that go to it, but it's tight knit there. And I just, that's pretty remarkable. Why do you think that is? Do you think it was the leadership of the youth pastor and your community as a whole?
I think so. Our youth pastor kind of had that dual job hat going on. So he was the sports director at the YMCA as well as the youth pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he and his wife, everybody knew him, and I think that he definitely had an influence for sure. And they opened up doors after football game because we were right across the street from our high school.
Mm-hmm.
And after the football games, every Friday night, they'd have, like, they called it overtime in the base of our church, and the youth would come, and then that just exploded. Originally it was like 20 people after a football game, and then it turned into like 100.
Wow.
Like people not from our church would go because it's just word. So yeah, I mean, I think the people, all my buddies from high school, that was I think word just spread. We just had a good time, and we studied. Like, we didn't just sit around and give high fives and play games all the time, but we did actually study, and we would read the Bible and learn. And it was good.
Which is incredible, because that's what my church that really got a hold of me was Calvary Church down in Jupiter, Florida, and Pastor Dan Plord, who I'll mention several times because he's very impactful in my life in a very positive way. Really, I mean, just a man of God, truly. But that's what the church is. It's a Bible study church. That's the kind of the tail or tagline. Chapter by chapter, verse by verse, and pick a book of the Bible and start at verse 1 and go all the way through. And it's amazing how attractive God's word is, right? I mean, it's His word. It's going to call and pull on our heart and pull on our mind and our spirit and everything else. It doesn't need to be added to, and it certainly doesn't need to be diminished, to your point. And I think getting that at a youth and hearing your perspective, that was even done in a high school, middle school setting, and it still will resonate. It doesn't need to be a carnival. It doesn't need to be all these lickies and chewies. Stick to that, and that's going to call it the heart.
Yeah, it was such a good time, and it definitely had an impact. Like, I feel like, though I'm not in the military anymore and doing something else, I love to read the Bible. I love to read. I tell my wife and friends, I'm a nerd. I like reading novels.
Yeah.
Okay. But I primarily read, academic journals, and I love reading publications from like Lexham Press and learn from the theologians, and what's in their head,
Right.
So it's interesting to hear from that church you attended, the Bible study atmosphere of the church, where you learn step by step by step and verse by verse. That's awesome. I wish we did that. I mean, our church does like the topics, you know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
Which is great, which is fine. But I do like to get in the actual words. You're right. The Bible is tremendous. It's like a mosaic of ideas, intersecting, overlapping, different stories, different people, but they all form together and come to the head with Jesus, and trying to find out the little details and the minutia and understanding the context. It's phenomenal. Love it.
It is. Well, I love that, man, because what I find too is, like, I've been really trying to explore, or not explore, but broaden my horizons on reading other things, reading, it's nonfiction, but applicable times, whatever, like Wars, one I'm reading right now about the weaponization of social media. And it's fascinating. It's great. But when I get too distracted on reading all these other things, man, I gotta be staying grounded in the word. That's got to be my primary all the time. And I mean, that's, our daily bread that we need. But even if I get where I'm only doing like quick devotionals. I mean, like I just, to your point, like this morning, man, First Peter, and it's not long, it's 5 chapters, but I mean, going through First Peter, and it's like that reinvigorates the soul, reinvigorates the spirit more than anything else. I mean, it's unreal what it can do, what the scripture can do. So you fire me up, Derek. You fire me up. All right. So tell me, what was it like? Because I didn't have that experience. What was it like, with you having your faith, with you, being saved, as you said, going then into the military, into a special operations unit, Navy SEALs. Tell us about that.
Well, I would get that question a lot from students too, and they'd be like, "How did you maintain your faith in Buds and SEAL team?" I was like, "Well, this apple fell very far from the tree. I didn't, to be completely honest, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I was in rebellion. I'll say the least. I guess I was so used to studying. I just got burnt out in college. I just got burnt out, and 9/11 happened. That definitely changed things. But once I got into the team, it wasn't like I was a rebellious, adversary to the gospel. Like I still believed it, but I definitely wasn't living it. And I wouldn't go to all the places they would go to, and I still maintained a level of personal moral integrity.
Mm-hmm.
But I did definitely cross lines, and it's so hard. It's so hard to be. It's just difficult. I mean, there's no easy way to put it. You're put in positions where your integrity is always being, not oppressed, but like pushed.
Right.
Like seeing how much can they blow into that candle until it goes out. You know what I mean? I'm like trying to keep it lit. I'm like, it was a tough thing. And every once in a while, I'd have people randomly walk up to me in the cage of the team, and Buddy Corey would be like, "Hey, so our family's having this talk about baptism. Like, do you have to be baptized to be saved?" And it's totally random. Like I'm doing my gear in the cage, And so I was like, okay, if he's asking me that question, not saying I'm a pastor by any stretch of the imagination, but he's asking me for a reason. So maybe something right. But it was just a hard thing. It's really hard. And I definitely came back to the word. I definitely came back. But man, it's not an easy thing to do.
Oh my gosh, Derek. Yeah, but no, man, thank you for being honest and truthful. I mean, that's what the raw, transparent, real, I think is the tagline I made for this show. And that's, because, immediately what pops in mind is like Omari Thompson. He was my wide receiver at West Point at Army. And I mean, we went to the prep school together. I think he was 17 too when he showed up, and I was 17. And he was, so committed to the Lord from the first day I met him. And, but just being associated with us heathens on the football team, man, it was so hard for him, and he got made fun of. We teased him, and I look back, and now Omari's a chaplain in the Army. It's so fitting that, to see his path and what that kid, and now he's a man, and he was a young man then, I shouldn't say kid, but like how instrumental he was to me coming to my faith years later. Because he was, to your point, he didn't shove it down our throats. He wasn't like offensive with it, but I knew where he stood. I would cuss in the huddle during the game. I would be cussing and screaming. I remember against TCU and I'm mad because we didn't know what the play was. And so I'm cussing, and he's looking at me in the middle of the game, and he's just looking at, he's our wide receiver. He just gives me these little dart eyes, just burning a hole through me. He's like, "Come on, Chad, you're better than that." I'm like, "Omari, I'm sorry." Cause I'm like dropping, very disrespectful, GDs, in the middle there. And I'll just never forget that. And it's kind of cool because your story about a guy knowing where you stood, and not that it won't be a challenge, and not that we don't get, tested all the time, to in that, or that, the temptations to sin and all of that, but that, guys knew where you stood, which I think is pretty cool. It shows that you did walk with your faith.
Yeah. I think I did, but I definitely know I could have done better. Could have always done better. And I feel like I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine after I got out of the team and I went to instruct while still in the Navy. I was at the comm school. friend. He and I would talk, and he would always make fun of me about my faith. He's like, "This is ridiculous." He's like, "Just make fun of me about it."
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh, like, if you think it's so ridiculous, why do you always want to talk about it? You know,
Right.
why are you always making fun of me? You know, I mean, it wasn't constant, but it was like, routine that he would make some jab. And I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, I do believe that. You know,
Right. Yeah.
no kidding. We would have talks about it, and I was reading this book, "What's So Great About Christianity" by Dinesh D'Souza, and
Mm-hmm.
I read it a couple of times, and I thought it's such a good book, and I gave him a copy. And he asked me, he's like, "Dude, you're always reading that book. Like, why are you reading it?" I would show him every once in a while. And it was a little back in the day. It was a long time ago. He's like, I might read that. I was like, all right, here. I gave it to him. I was like, just whenever you're done, bring it back. Well, he said I lost it. And 2 years later, I don't have it. So I got another copy, right? Well, a couple of years later go by, and he comes walking into the locker room. And he's like, Derek, he just gives me a huge hug. And it wasn't the book, it wasn't me, it was him. But he's like, "I just want to let you know that I gave my life to Jesus." I was like, "Oh, buddy, that's so good." Give him another hug. And
Yeah.
it's such a good experience. Like, he started out with someone that, definitely was your prototypical SEAL, right? Definitely lived that rock star life, right? And we would have talks, and he would make fun of me about it. And then a couple of years go down the line, and I haven't seen him or heard from him forever. He comes in civilian clothes, and next thing you know, he's giving me a big old hug saying he got saved. It was awesome. It's good
Dude,
stuff.
how unbelievable is that? I mean, that's the stories that, man, folks need to hear. I mean, and just, I mean, yes, we know that's the Holy Spirit, right? We know that's the Holy Spirit, but at the same time, like, that, we can identify by the fruit, and like that you're able to, because I will say that had to have been trying and difficult on you to be in those environments. I mean, I think about the environment of the Ranger Regiment, my Ranger platoons, and I was, I had accepted Christ my senior year at West Point, but man, I'll say, I mean, it was a mustard seed of faith. I mean, it was 2.5% Christ, 97.5% heathen still. And I mean, it was just a continual, just needing to refine me and peel me and renew me and peel me to my core, which finally, continues to transpire and take place. But I mean, that's pretty sweet just for you to have that come full circle and to see that full circle moment is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Here's a question once I got out, and then, 2017 was really a time that, the Lord really exposed me to my core in a way that I needed it, but it got me to PTSD therapy and going the therapy route and really being in my Bible. I mean, just being ingratiated in the Word and all of that. And I still find myself there today, but I'm curious on your front, because you were early on and knew the Word going in. I mean, I do. I read a lot of the Bible, and like, especially New Testament stuff. I'm like, all right, like, I'm at a crossroads of like, all right, war and taking the life of another, even here on the earthly sense, justified, not justified, regardless of that, like, there's still like, man, is that what Jesus is really calling us to do? And or do we use man-made reasons to justify those actions? What's your take on that? Have you ever struggled with that? Have you ever been questioned on that? And I guess I'll turn it over.
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah, right.
Killing, is it justified?
What's that?
Killing, is it justified? Is that pretty much to sum up the question?
Well, I mean, I know there can be time. I mean, I guess in my eyes, there's times that it can be justified, but I don't know. I will say this: I don't think Jesus is celebrating in heaven like, yes, got him. I think that's another lost soul. Whether that person has not accepted Christ, that their life is taken and they're doing horrendous acts here on earth. While I think the human nature is to celebrate that and to laud that, I don't know that Christ or God the Father are celebrating in heaven. I think, to me, I would imagine Jesus is weeping in heaven at another lost soul for eternal hell.
Right.
I guess that's where it comes from on that nature. And then it dies down into, a lot of the, teachings of Jesus about, if the enemy is coming at you, turn another cheek, it's said an eye for an eye, but I say, love your enemy as yourself. So, I mean, all those types of things just kind of makes me, ask the hard questions of myself.
No, it's a great question, and I have struggled with it, and I would, no kidding, when I was at the prep school, I would just close the door in the office. No one knew this, and I would sit back and think like, man, I don't want to hit the military at all, and this is my life, it's being in a team, but it's like, am I doing the right thing? Because here's the bottom line, we are all imagers of God, all of us. It's innate. It's not conditional. It's not, you're not like half image and then you can graduate to full image. No, you
Right.
are. You just are. And I think, from the worst of us to the best of us, we're all imagers of God, and that's a verb. And we live, and we are a representative nature. We are the God's representatives on earth, right? And that's who we are, and it's a vocation. So when we go out of our way to end that, I agree. I don't think God is applauding it at all, and I think we might get shocked by some of the people that we see in heaven. But I don't know. That's a tough one. Military is important. I wouldn't say I'm a pacifist at all. And I know people are out there that just refuse not to fight back, refuse not to confront. And I respect that. However, if something is coming after my wife or my daughter, actions will be taken, and I don't think God will get mad at me for that, because I'm trying to protect life, not just take it out of a whim. So it's a really tough question. You're kind of like bouncing on the edge of a knife on that one, because, I guess it's all like, it all boils down to what's in your heart and why you're doing it. And the only person that knows that is you and God.
Yeah, no. And I love that you said, I've described it as a double-edged sword. Like I can see both, and there's times where I'm on more one side of the sword versus the other time of the sword. And did I use pacifist at the beginning when I was talking about that? Did I use that word? Okay, and then you used, because I was thinking it in my head, because I've said that a good buddy of mine, close buddy of mine, that's what I told him. I said, man, I think when I first, like 2017, when I first started going through all the treatment, everything else, I was like, dude, I think I turned into a complete pacifist. Like my pendulum swung so much from like being frozen and thinking that combat, and like, if you haven't done it, you're not tough, blah, blah, blah. All the false masculine macho-ness. But then it swung so far that I was like, I would catch flies in the house and let them go outside. Right. Like it was like way overboard. And I think, I love what you say. And Pastor Dan used to always say this, sometimes the best way to see God in us is to look at ourselves, because he has made us in the image of him. And from a protective role, from a mama bear role with our, our wives and those who are mothers out there, and the way they will protect their young and men as well, And he used to use a great analogy. He would say, you come as a guest at my front door and knock on my front door at 3 p.m. and you will get a different person than if you come through my daughter's window at 3 a.m. in the morning. You will get two different of me. And that's that double-edged sword of, when it's justified, when it's not justified. But man, I still, even at that, I mean, there are times where, intellectually I get that, and intellectually I can be there, but then, emotionally and spiritually, it's hard questions for me to ask. But I think that's where the dialogue needs to be had. I mean, for guys who maybe aren't there in their walk in Christ, or are now getting into the book and getting into the word, yet they have, they've done things in combat that they're now questioning, or horrendous things that were unintentional that happen in combat. Balancing that all out, man, that's a journey to dive into that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's so difficult one, such a difficult one to handle. I've had people ask me, I've had students I've had students quit because they're worried about that.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like you kind of know what you're getting into. You know, it's not like everyone's going out there killing everyone. It's not. That's
Right.
It's not how it is. But you are voluntarily putting yourself in a position where it could be either you or me, and you have to make that decision, right? And it may not happen as often as you probably, your 18-year-old kid, you probably want that all the time, which is, what I don't understand that now, but I did then. But
right,
it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and I truly believe that as we are born as imagers, it's conditional based, and it's how we are that representative agent of God, on earth to expand and multiply. And Jesus said, they even asked Jesus, like, what's the greatest commandment? He's like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor. That's it. He didn't even mention. He didn't name any commandment. Clearly, he knows them. He wrote them, right?
Right.
But that's it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor. Right. You do that, and you're going to live a good life.
Yeah. So. All right, let me ask you another hard one. I don't know why I'm teeing you up, man. Why I'm teeing you up with these hard ones. Here's another one. American greatness, American exceptionalism. And I will preface this. I'm not going to put it all on you. I will answer my view. Like, we put ourselves on this pedestal at times, and I'm not saying that we can't be thankful and grateful and have honor and serving our country and being blessed to be here in the United States. But I think there are times right now where we're going so far where it's, we're the greatest and everyone else sucks. And I don't find that like Christ-like at all. And sometimes it's the evangelists out there that can kind of carry that banner as well. I think, we can be a beacon of hope, but I think there's an arrogance and a pridefulness that we need to call out and I'll do that as a veteran. I mean, a lot of these folks are not people that have served or have done the hard things of combat, and they're marching to that drum out there. And I think it's a little bit, I think it's unhealthy. And what's your perspective after you serving in the SEALs, serving overseas, being in combat, coming back, teaching at the Naval Special Warfare Preparatory School? What's your opinion of that?
I agree to a level. I think American exceptionalism, I guess when it first was announced or really held, it was something that was needed. The world needed that light. But now it's almost, I agree, it's almost like a pridefulness and arrogance. Like, oh, we're the only one that has freedom. Like, well, I mean, not really. The other freedom too. No, I agree. It's almost when I hear that, when I hear you say that, and I've heard it before, and of course in the military you're all pro America, yeah.
Yeah, right.
But then it gets to the point where it's almost like the kind of like we're Babylon and there's no one like us, or like in the Old Testament where God's calling Babylon out and like, you think you're the only freaking one? Like, you kidding me right now? Or Nineveh, like there's no one as good as us. It's in the
right.
We're kind of, I'm not saying like I don't want to get all like apocalyptic here, but it's almost at that point where it's the arrogance is such a big thing. And I think there's a Christian base in our country for sure, 100%. But I definitely think they kind of take the whole America First thing a little far to the point where it can be arrogance. And there's no wonder why some countries are annoyed by us all the time.
Or even like an idol, it can almost be like America becomes the golden calf where we're worshiping this land and worshiping the freedoms that are awesome, that are bestowed upon us, that what it was founded on. I'm not trying to knock that, but like, hey, I guess that's maybe where, my thought goes like, all right, we're making our country an idol, and we need to, and that, to your point, that's a bad precedent, because anybody that made idols, it didn't turn out well, and it goes back to the commandment. I love, the American military. Yes. But think about that. Think about maybe not the first half of the commandment was always prevalent in, SEAL teams, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul. But the second commandment, that's what I've said multiple times. People ask me like, oh, what was it like serving what? I go, man, when you get that 30-second out call and you're getting ready to go ropes, ropes, rope on top of a rooftop, and it's not the flag that's on our sleeve. It's not the land that's thousands of miles away. It's not the U.S. Constitution. It's the man to my right and to my left. That's the only thing that matters when I get that 30-second out call and get ready to land on the X.
Sure.
And that's loving our neighbor as ourself, loving our brother as ourself. That is what I think is the defining love of the military, and what did to us, feeling that, living that, breathing that, having it life or death at that magnitude is what sows those bonds. That's what forges that unity of those experiences, because it was about the man to the left and the right.
And the brotherhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, but I mean, not until you said it, but that's loving our guy to our left and right, as ourself, as we're going into that. And now, hey, now it's up to us to, to be bold, to be what you were. And I'm not always saying be bold, but maybe sometimes just stand. I love in Ephesians, he doesn't tell us to take multiple steps when, we're putting on the armor. All he says at the end is he's like, and stand, and whatever you do, stand firm. He doesn't say step, just being that steadfast rock that, that I think others will gravitate towards who maybe aren't there yet.
For sure. And I definitely idolizing the country and is definitely something that needs to be thought about. Like, people need to think about that. And you're 100% right. I mean, what makes the military so great, especially with special operations community, just anyone, every branch, is the fact that you're right. At the end of the day, when you're either about to hop out of a helo or you're about to crash a door or, whatever, it's the guy right next to you that matter. That's everything. Nothing else exists except
right
moment. And if you go outside of that and you start thinking about other things, that's when you make a mistake. So everything, your inner circle, when you're working with your brothers and sisters, you're exactly right. That's us living a life where we're loving our neighbor and our brother and sister. And that's what I love about the military. There are other things I'm not a fan of, but just like anything else. But yeah, the special operations community is such a good one because it's molded and founded on loving your person to your left and to your right.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, obviously that's a difficult part for probably all of us when we leave that. That's why the military transition, I think, is difficult for so many that transition out. And I'll say it, myself included, because of missing that type of atmosphere. I think it's, for diving in and being grounded in the word, like that's it will. And I'm still trying to find that. I think part of this, Christ over fear, is a way of finding that next fight, that next battle to take on. And maybe it's not a physical battle, but probably more important, the spiritual battle, because that's for eternity, right? I mean, the physical battle's for this life, but I mean, the spiritual realm is forever. And but I think if we can get more guys and gals to figure out what battle they want to fight, here. And I don't know. I don't know that it can physically be at the same level, because it's hard when when all of those chemical dumps are happening from the brain on that ultimate adrenaline rush. I mean, there is something to be said that's hard to replicate. But there's still ways to fight those battles here that for good, good versus evil, and whatever endeavor that is. And I know I'm kind of rambling at this point, but what's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. And I think that's part of the Great Commission, right? So we're out there and trying to spread the word about Christ as far as we can, although I feel personally that I'm not very good at it. I could be better at it, but that's it. I mean, we're fighting a battle, right? That's why I think Paul uses such militaristic terminology because he knows and respects the Roman army and how disciplined and structured they are, and he want to utilize kind of what they're doing with the Christian. And it's a battle, a spiritual battle, where it's something that we have to fight with help, with people around us. And I think if we constantly think we can do it ourselves, that's like exactly opposite of what God wants. Jesus wants. So the spiritual fighting, spiritual battle in the world today, I think it's at an all-time high. I mean, it's such a big deal to me when I still look at the news, and now I'm rambling, but
No, you're not.
I hear the news and it's like, what is going on? Like, this is not like all this stuff happening all the time at such a frequency, it's like, what? Something has to be like ordering this, you know what I mean?
Right. Oh yeah.
That might be a bad word, but there's got to be something behind it, right? And I've had talks about this. I have a Bible study with a bunch of dudes in the neighborhood, and we talk about this all the time. It's like there's something. We have to be on guard, like you said. We have to stand and not be afraid to stand, right? And fight this battle that it's daunting. That's why we need each other. And that's why I'm so happy and honored to be on your show. Because I mean, having a person that's out there, like you're being vulnerable, just throwing these out every week, and talking the hard talk and weird stuff that people should listen to. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what needs to happen. And it's such a hard, it keeps me up at night thinking about the whole spiritual aspect to it. Cause I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Oh, dude, I love it, man. You fired me up bringing it. I mean, my Bible study on Wednesday mornings, we're in Revelation. We're studying the book of Revelation.
How's that going?
It's long and difficult, but well, the church down in Florida, Calvary Church, we did Revelation in 2014, and then we moved up here in 2019, and then Calvary redid it just last year, end of last year. They redid Revelation down at that church, and they post them all online and watch them, and we're studying it. But we have to, and I also think though, end times prophecy and, spiritual gifts are the two most undertaught things of the Bible in the church from the pulpit. And that's not because Christ is telling us not to, speak of that. That's somebody else who's diminishing that and minimizing, end times prophecy and spiritual gifts being taught, because people need that. And when people hear it, it can blow our minds, and it can be where we're asking some questions and be like, what? But I mean, to your point, whether, you're in your small knit group of men and you guys are in the word and know it and see all the things, but people on the outside who aren't in the word, they're looking at things going on right now. I mean, the birth pain's getting closer and closer and closer of, rumors of wars and all of these things and all the predictive prophecy that's pointing to, Christ's second coming. I'm just going to come out and say it. It's his word. That's why it does draw us in. That's why it does gain our attention. That's why we're attracted to it. And I think we need to be bold in our faith. So I thank you for bringing it up and talking about those things and talking about the spiritual battle that's taking place right now.
Oh, for sure. It's interesting. Revelation, prophecy, spiritual gifts totally needs to be addressed more. Yeah. I think the biggest struggle is, we got a Bible, right? Like 3/4 of this is Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
How many times do people read the Old Testament? Like, honestly.
Right.
If you become a Christian, we'll give you a New Testament. Well, what? Like, majority of this book is Old Testament. I wish we would get into that, because I have a great book. It's the Old Testament and the New, right? And it shows the two, I think Hebrews and Revelation are the two sources in the New Testament that utilize concepts, grammar, syntax the most from the Old Testament. And it's like connecting those dots, and like, so a lot of the stuff that we read in the Old Testament has direct links to what's happening in the New Testament. It's just that the writers are taking words and philosophies And Tim Mackey on the Bible Project calls them hyperlinks, right? They'll drop these little nuggets all throughout the New Testament to hyperlink that thought and that concept to the Old Testament. And we don't know that. Like, I'm just beginning to learn that.
Right.
But we're not taught it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in Revelation that you'll read and be like, wow, that's freaking really weird.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's really weird, and it's in the Old Testament somewhere.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Understanding that context is so fundamentally important to understanding our Bible. And that's what we talk about in our Bible studies. Just got to know the context, and not just like what I was taught in college. Read the verse before and after. No.
Yeah. Right.
It's a little bit more than that.
Yeah. Right. No, I know.
What's going on in the town? What are the contemporary writings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They're not biblical. I get it. But contemporary people were reading stuff, and that was involved in what, helped them write and was an influence. So it's okay to read that stuff. Don't take it canonically, but it's okay to read something that someone else wrote that was contemporary to the biblical writers. Mm-hmm. So that needs to be, in my opinion, that needs to be taught, because I think there's a hunger for it. And my favorite theologian, Dr. Mike Heiser, man, that guy is just absolutely brilliant. He always talks about this. He's like, the number one thing that is lost is the whole contextual context of the Bible, and reading it as a manual. Mm-hmm. Most people read this thing as a manual, like a user manual, and that's how you're going to read it. So I think we should address and read the Bible like a fiction. Not saying it's fiction. Disclaimer: I believe it's all real and inerrant. I believe it.
Right.
However, you read a novel differently than you would reading a TV user manual, right? You're going to know on page 77, this guy says one thing and it's kind of strange, and then 200 pages later he says something else, or someone else says something, and it like draws you back to what he said on page 77. It's like, it's okay to read a book that way. It's okay to read the Bible that way. So when you do have these hyperlinks and all these, like the meta narrative of what's going on in actual contemporary world in 1500 BC, whenever it was written, it draws you to these concepts, especially in like Revelation, and that's my primary job now, is understanding the Old Testament, because it totally shapes the New.
Dude, that's big time, man. I love it. You fire me up, Derek. Well, and I think it's, and I don't want to say this. I'm going to say it, but I think for men, but I'm not trying to discredit women in this. But I think for men, especially like, kind of, men who were in the military, combat veterans, like there's a draw. I think it's like psychologically proven that men gravitate more towards nonfiction and women gravitate more towards like fictional readings, if you will. Mm-hmm. So not that women can't like nonfictional and men can't like fictional, but that's typically, more apt. So I'm saying that because I think if men got more into the word and got more into the Bible, and I even think about me, the only reason I used to go around and say, oh, I'm not really religious, I'm not really a religious guy, it was because I was ignorant, because I was embarrassed, because I never had been taught, never read, didn't know anything about it. So I just kind of went with that hallmark standard answer. But then once I started reading it and diving in and just learning about, the prophecies that have taken place 100% up till today of exactly how they were supposed to. Israel forming as a nation again in 1948. I mean, 2/3 pointing to Christ's second coming, and only a third of this prophecy pointing to his first coming. I mean, it's mind blowing in a good way, and I think it would draw folks in. Now, I also think to what this is about. I mean, I think hearing the testimonies, the stories of others and what Christ has done in their life, I think that draws people in, maybe the first step, but then boom, they get into the word and it's like, boom, let them go, let them rock. 'Cause that'll be enough, for certain. Rant complete on my end. Tell you,
it's a cool thing.
It is.
It's such a, reading the Bible, and there's something to, my goodness, there's just so many narratives running through it. It all leads to Jesus, but it's like connecting those dots and seeing how this like crazy biblical epic is building this mosaic,
Yep.
And you're like, I'm looking at it from this angle. No, I need to back up and see it from distance so I can see what's going on. And, one of the most famous books in the Bible is John, right? And it's just John 3:16. Everybody knows it.
Right.
But why? I was asking in my Bible study group, like, why did John use the term word? Like, in the beginning was the word. Why
Mm-hmm.
that word? Of
Mm-hmm.
all the words, why that one, right? Well, I don't know if this is the answer, but I mean, Jeremiah, the word came to Jeremiah, right? He's like a embodied Yahweh figure,
Mm-hmm.
embodied, not conceptual, like embodied. The word of the Lord touched Jeremiah on the lips. Touched. That's personification. That's
Mm-hmm.
anthropomorphic language, and that's all throughout the Bible. And there's these narratives that you see, and that's what I love about it, because I see the word of the Lord, the angel of the Lord, the burning bush situation. There's
Yeah.
three characters in the burning bush. It's the angel of the Lord, God, and Moses. Like, what? Like, how many movies have you ever seen an angel in that scene, like Prince of Egypt, or not Prince of Egypt? All these movies, it's never even taught. Like, this is
Right.
completely wiped away, and the angel of the Lord that was sent to help Moses and then lead him out to Canaan. Take heed from him, right? Because he may not forgive your trespasses. What? Like, an angel? God, how does an angel forgive? And my name is in him, right? My name is in him. He's different. What? So, I mean, all this stuff in the Old Testament that gets linked all the way to the New, and Jesus making referencing himself as that figure. It's like, hold on, you were in the Old Testament? Like, yeah, I was.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, maybe not Jesus, like he is but isn't. It's weird, but yeah. I mean, Abraham, when he's sitting there and he's with Sarah, right? He sees these three people walk up to him.
Mm-hmm.
People, not figure that's floating. Like, three
Right. Yeah. Right.
And what does he do? He immediately worships.
Yeah.
Immediately. So he recognized that guy. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's God.
Yeah.
Right? And the other two are just kind of like hanging out. They're about to like throw down the gauntlet of Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Yeah.
Destroy them. It's like, all right, man, I won't do it unless, however the story continues. But those are three people. I mean, I'm not saying they're people, they're angels, clearly.
Right.
They're just walking around. There's no wings.
Yeah.
Just tooling around. That's awesome. That is not. When I talk to my buddies about that, I'm like, that God is man, or is an embodied thing on the earth in the Old Testament. I'm like, what? It's like, yeah, it's everywhere. Like, I don't understand why this is not being taught. Like,
yeah. Well, and we kind of touched on that, and I'm thinking out loud, which can be dangerous, Derek, but dude, well, and part of the description on this is I say like part therapy session, part Bible study, part talk show, I think is like the description on the, YouTube channel. But this was definitely part Bible study. And I love that. I'm going to propose, that you and I, we can talk offline, but we ought to have something every once in a while, out there where we dive into a little bit more, making it, I don't know how many episodes, but making it where, we dive into this. And I think combat veterans, especially, I think men are longing for this. They're not knowing where to go. They don't know where to find it. And there is an ability. And I want to declare that right now. Like, there has been a time, and there still is a time when I, in Revelation and going through this. And I mean, there's so many questions I have and insecurities about saying the wrong thing in it. But man, the Lord knows our heart. He knows that we're longing for him. We're longing for that relationship. And that's what he wants. And he wants us to do it with other fellow men, to sharpen ourselves, sharpen one another. So I thank you for coming on here and doing that today, Derek, because it's been awesome.
Thanks for having me. This was a great conversation, Chad. Thanks for inviting me. Honored.
Well, and I have a strong inclination this will not be the last time we see you. So,
Awesome.
but for this episode, it will be. And I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing just your story, and then really what I've gained is just your heart for the Lord and your longing to chase after Him, which is invigorating. It's inspiring, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your heart with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right, brother. I'll see you soon. All right.
All righty.
All right, folks. Hey, that's another episode of Christ Over Fear with Derek Hanel, and former Navy SEAL, former police officer, And just amazing to hear his story and how he had his faith throughout, early age into high school, how it kind of, went off, not one off course, but how there was a divided path in the future, but how 9/11 brought him back to that path of wanting to be a SEAL and his steadfastness. And you can hear his heart for the Lord and just his knowledge and his ability to continue to train his mind and his soul and his brain on that, which is awesome. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Christ Over Fear. And until next time, continue to fight the good fight. Thanks.